Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where heartwarming tales meet powerful life lessons. Today's story is one of love, loss, and redemption. It centers around Danielle, the grieving widow of a fallen soldier, who faces humiliation and injustice at the hands of officers unaware of who she truly is. What begins as a tragic farewell spirals into an emotional confrontation, but in the end, it becomes a story of honor, restored, and love remembered. Stay with us as we follow Danielle's journey through heartbreak, betrayal, and an unexpected moment of reckoning that will remind you of the importance of respect, dignity, and standing tall in the face of ignorance. This is more than just a story. It's a tribute to those we've lost and a reminder that love always finds a way to prevail. If you love stories filled with raw emotion, justice, and powerful moments of personal triumph, drop a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share where you're listening from. We love hearing from our community. Danielle Greene pulls into the military base parking lot, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. Her heart is heavy with grief, and her mind swims with thoughts of her late husband, Sergeant Marcus Greene. Today is the funeral, the final farewell to the man who had been her best friend, her love, and her protector. Dressed in a fitted black dress and a wide-brimmed hat that shields her teary eyes, she clutches a worn photo of her wedding day, the day she married Marcus in a small chapel, laughing and full of hope for a future they'd never get to see. Beside her, in the passenger seat, rests the funeral invitation and a letter Marcus had written to her before deployment, one he asked to be opened only if he didn't make it back. Danielle whispers, "I promised you, Marcus. I'll say goodbye properly." She steps out of the car, straightening her posture, despite the crushing weight of grief. The flags at the base entrance snap in the wind, and the chapel looms in the distance. The same chapel where soldiers Marcus served with are waiting to honor his sacrifice. But as she walks toward the doors, two white military police officers step forward, barring her way. "Hold it right there, ma'am," one of them barks, his tone sharp. Danielle's eyes dart between the two officers. "I'm here for Sergeant Greene's funeral. I need to go inside." The second officer, a burly man with a sneer on his lips, sizes her up. There's a look in his eyes, disdain and disbelief. "Who exactly do you think you are?" he scoffs. "You sure you're not at the wrong event?" Danielle holds up the invitation with a shaky hand. "I'm his wife," she says, her voice strained but steady. The officers exchange glances, both of them smirking. "You, his wife?" the first officer snorts. "Not buying it." Danielle feels her chest tighten. She knew she'd have to battle grief today, but racism? She wasn't ready for that. "You need to leave," the second officer says dismissively. "This is a military event, not a free-for-all." Danielle's fingers curl around the wedding photo she brought, trying to keep herself calm. "Please," she says through clenched teeth, "I have every right to be here." The first officer's expression hardens. "No, you don't. If you don't leave on your own, we'll remove you." Danielle's hands tremble, but she won't be deterred. "I'm not leaving," she says firmly. The officer leans in closer, his voice a low threat. "Then you'll be arrested." Danielle's grief turns to anger. How dare they keep her from saying goodbye to the love of her life? Before she can think twice, she makes a decision. She rushes past the officers, sprinting toward the chapel doors. Danielle bursts into the chapel, the sound of her heels echoing across the marble floor. Rows of mourners, all dressed in their formal military uniforms, turn to stare at her. At the front of the room lies Marcus's casket, draped in the American flag. It's a painful sight, but Danielle refuses to break down. Not yet. "Marcus," she whispers, tears stinging her eyes as she takes a step toward the front. But before she can reach the casket, the two officers charge in after her. "That's enough!" one of them shouts. Gasps ripple through the crowd as the officers grab Danielle and force her to the ground. She struggles, kicking and shouting, but they twist her arms behind her back. Her cries fill the chapel, a gut-wrenching sound of heartbreak and defiance. The mourners are stunned. Some shift uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of what to do. Others whisper to each other, watching as the officers snap handcuffs onto Danielle's wrists. "You're under arrest for trespassing," one officer says smugly. Danielle looks around, gasping for breath. Her heart shatters, knowing that Marcus's final moments will be marred by this nightmare. "Stop, please," she cries. "I just wanted to say goodbye." Suddenly, a commanding voice cuts through the chaos. "What the hell is going on here?" All eyes turn to the back of the chapel as Colonel James Hathaway strides forward. The colonel is a tall, formidable man with steely gray eyes that demand respect. He wears his decorated uniform with authority, and his sharp gaze is fixed on the two officers holding Danielle down. The officers falter under his intense stare, but quickly regain their composure. "This woman was causing a disturbance," one officer says defensively. "She was trying to sneak in." Colonel Hathaway's eyes narrow. "Disturbance?" he repeats, his voice dangerously low. "That woman is Sergeant Greene's widow." The officers' faces pale, their smug expressions vanishing in an instant. One of them stammers, We didn't know, sir." Colonel Hathaway steps closer, his gaze cold and unyielding. "You mean to tell me you didn't bother to ask? You tackled a grieving widow at her own husband's funeral?" The officers open their mouths to respond, but no words come out. The weight of their mistake crashes down on them like a tidal wave. "Release her, now!" Hathaway's voice leaves no room for argument. The officers fumble with the handcuffs, quickly unlocking them. Danielle struggles to her feet, her breath hitching with emotion. Hathaway steadies her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're where you belong," he says quietly. Danielle sat on the cold metal bench of the base's small holding area, her wrists raw from the too tight handcuffs that had just been removed. She rubbed at the marks absent-mindedly, her heart still hammering against her ribcage. She thought about Marcus, his broad smile, the way he used to squeeze her hand when things got tough, and the idea that this was how her farewell to him had begun filled her with rage and grief. The echo of boots clicked against the floor. Sergeant Daniels, the officer who arrested her, strutted back and forth outside the holding cell, chewing gum like this was just another day of routine security. His partner, Officer Keating, leaned lazily against the wall, checking his phone. "Well," Daniels sneered, "we told you not to make a scene. But no, you had to play hero." Danielle stared straight ahead, gripping Marcus's dog tags in her hand. "I'm not the one who made this a scene," she said quietly, her voice tight with controlled fury. Keating snorted. "Lady, you don't even belong here." Daniels shot her a condescending smile. "Bet you thought you'd waltz in here and play the grieving widow act for some attention. Sorry to disappoint, sweetheart, but you don't get special treatment just because you married a soldier." Danielle's jaw clenched. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her words not loud but sharp enough to make Daniels pause. Keating chuckled darkly. "Regret it? Lady, you should be grateful we didn't charge you with assault. Running past two officers at a military event? That's grounds for a night in lockup." Danielle's blood boiled, but she kept her expression cold. Every second wasted in that cramped room was another second taken from the funeral, the one place she needed to be. Marcus had been everything to her. His service, his sacrifice. They were a testament to his heart. And these officers, with their smirks and ignorance, had no idea who they were dealing with. Before she could respond, the door swung open with a sharp clang. Colonel James Hathaway strode in, his posture rigid and authoritative. His eyes scanned the room like a hawk locking onto prey, and when his gaze landed on Danielle, something flickered across his face, a mixture of shock, recognition, and anger. "You two," Hathaway snapped, his voice hard and unforgiving. "Get her out of here, now." Daniels opened his mouth to argue, but Hathaway cut him off with a glare that could stop a charging bull. "This woman is Sergeant Marcus Greene's widow." His voice was steady but seething with quiet rage. "You've made a grave mistake." Daniels blinked, taken aback. "Wait, she's—" "Yes, she is." Hathaway didn't wait for further excuses. "If you had bothered to do your job properly, you would have known that before this disgrace happened." He stepped closer, his jaw tight. "I want both of you on report, effective immediately." Keating tried to stammer out an apology, but Hathaway was done listening. "Get out," he ordered. "Now." The officers scurried out of the room, their faces pale. Hathaway exhaled slowly and turned to Danielle, his expression softening. "Mrs. Greene," he said gently, "I'm so sorry for what you've been put through. Let's get you where you need to be." The chapel doors creaked open as Danielle and Colonel Hathaway stepped inside. The murmurs that had spread among the mourners when she was dragged out were now replaced by a hushed silence. All eyes turned toward her. The sea of uniforms, medals, and somber faces blurred in her vision. But Danielle kept walking, her heels echoing against the marble floor. At the front of the chapel lay Marcus's casket, draped in the American flag. Danielle's breath hitched as she saw it again, her knees threatening to give way beneath the weight of her grief. Hathaway gave her a reassuring nod and whispered, "Take your time." She approached the casket slowly, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch the smooth wood. The cold surface beneath her palm felt like a distant reminder of the man she had lost, so real and yet gone forever. The chaplain stood quietly at the side, waiting for her to give the eulogy she had prepared. Danielle swallowed hard, feeling the eyes of the room on her. For a moment, she doubted whether she could do it. But then she thought of Marcus, his bravery, his humor, the way he had always believed in her strength even when she didn't. She drew a shaky breath and began. Marcus wasn't just a soldier. He was a husband. He was a son. And to me, he was everything. Her voice wavered, but didn't break. He wasn't perfect. God knows he could be stubborn. But he was kind, and he was brave. Marcus lived with his heart on his sleeve, and he wore this uniform because he believed in something bigger than himself. She paused, glancing around the room. He believed in loyalty, in service, in respect. And not just the kind you get for wearing a uniform, but the kind you earn by being decent, by being human. The crowd was silent, hanging on to her every word. Some soldiers lowered their heads, a few wiping away tears. Danielle continued, her voice stronger now. Marcus would have given anything for the people in this room, and in the end, he did. She reached into her purse and pulled out the folded wedding photo she had carried with her. "This," she said, holding it up for the crowd to see, "is Marcus. Not just the soldier, but the man. The husband who danced with me in the kitchen. The friend who held me when life felt too heavy. The soul who gave me a reason to believe in love." She placed the photo gently on the casket, her fingers lingering for a moment. "And now," she whispered, "I have to let him go." As Danielle stepped back from the casket, Colonel Hathaway moved to her side. He gave her a solemn nod, then turned to address the crowd. "Sergeant Marcus Greene was a man of great honor," he said, his voice carrying across the chapel. "And today, we honor not just his service, but the life and love he shared with his wife, Danielle." He motioned to a soldier at the front of the chapel, who approached with a folded American flag. "On behalf of the United States Army," Hathaway said, "I present this flag to Mrs. Greene in recognition of her husband's service and sacrifice." Danielle accepted the flag, her hands trembling as she held it close to her chest. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were no longer just tears of sorrow. They were tears of pride, of love, and of gratitude for Marcus, for his sacrifice, and for the support she had found in this moment. As the ceremony came to a close, Hathaway escorted her out of the chapel, where soldiers and mourners lined up to pay their respects. Each handshake, each salute, was a reminder that Marcus's legacy would live on, not just in medals or flags, but in the hearts of those he had touched. Outside the chapel, the air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Danielle stood quietly, gazing out at the horizon, her heart heavy, but finally at peace. Hathaway joined her, his expression thoughtful. "You belong here," he said softly. "Always." Danielle smiled through her tears. "I know," she whispered. And for the first time since Marcus's death, she truly believed it. Weeks after the funeral, Danielle Greene found herself standing at the edge of a new chapter in life, though the weight of loss still lingered. The folded American flag, presented to her with solemn honor, rested on the mantel above the fireplace in her small but cozy home. Beside it sat a framed photograph of Marcus in uniform, his smile full of life and promise. Every morning, she touched the glass gently and whispered, "I love you," as if he could still hear her. The events of that day, the humiliation, the arrest, the intervention by Colonel Hathaway, had left a mark, but not the kind the two racist officers had intended. In the days that followed, word spread quickly through the military community and beyond. Danielle became a symbol of quiet resilience, and the story of what happened at Marcus's funeral resonated far and wide, sparking conversations about racism and respect for military families. Colonel Hathaway kept his promise, ensuring those officers faced consequences. A formal apology from the military police department came within days, along with notice that both officers had been dishonorably discharged. "This institution owes you an apology," Hathaway had said during a follow-up visit to Danielle's home, "and I hope this is a start." He meant every word. Danielle's life took on a new rhythm after the funeral. Marcus's old military comrades, some of whom she barely knew, became like family. They visited her regularly, bringing meals, helping with household chores, and keeping her company on the hard days. The community that had once seemed distant now surrounded her with love and respect. One bright morning, a knock at her door revealed Hathaway, accompanied by a group of soldiers dressed in casual clothes. "We've got one more thing to do," he said with a grin. Behind him, two men carried a freshly engraved plaque, "In memory of Sergeant Marcus Greene, a husband, a hero, a brother in arms." Danielle's breath caught in her throat as the soldiers installed the plaque at the entrance of the local park, one of Marcus's favorite places to visit on their rare weekends together. She couldn't stop the tears that welled in her eyes as she ran her fingers across the etched words. After the small gathering ended, Danielle stood alone by the plaque, gazing out at the green fields and playground where Marcus had once dreamed of bringing their future children. The grief still stung, but it was softer now, buffered by the kindness of strangers, friends, and soldiers who refused to let her walk this road alone. Before she left the park that day, she whispered one last message to Marcus, the breeze carrying her words through the trees. "I'll be okay, love, I promise." And, for the first time in weeks, she believed it. The story of Sergeant Marcus Greene and Danielle Greene wasn't just about loss or injustice. It was about finding strength in the unlikeliest of places and knowing that love endures, even beyond the grave. As she walked away from the plaque, a peaceful smile spread across her face. She knew that though life would never be the same, she would carry Marcus's legacy forward. With every step, every breath, and every act of kindness she performed in his memory. And with that, Danielle Greene found peace. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, loss, and redemption. Danielle's story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, standing up for what's right can restore dignity and honor. It's a powerful lesson that respect and love will always triumph over hatred and ignorance. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss another story that challenges, inspires, and stays with you long after it ends. We'll be back soon with more tales that uplift the spirit and remind us of the power within each of us to make a difference. Thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay strong, and never stop standing up for what's right.